welcome to Lincolnshire County Council Planning and Regulation Committee. I am Councillor Ian Fleet with the Chairman. To my immediate right hand side, left if you're watching or watching us on screen, I've got my Vice Chairman Charlotte Vernon with us, and it's unusual to be here on a Tuesday afternoon rather than Monday morning, something to do with bank holidays and coronations. I hope you've all had a good time. We've got a fairly good complement of committee. I think we've got one-ish or maybe two coming a little late, but otherwise no problems. From a administrative point of view, the fire alarm probably was tested yesterday morning, on a Monday morning. Even I don't think they stopped doing that on a bank holiday, do they? So if you do hear the fire alarm, please exit to the front of the building, which is behind me, and congregate outside, and we'll account for you at that stage. Water at the back of the room. I'm not aware of many public speakers coming forward, so I don't know how quickly the meeting will go, how slowly it will go. There is an NSIP presentation following the meeting, just in case everybody gets up enthusiastically and tries to wander out. So I'll just give you that word of caution now, because I'll be watching you and making sure you stay as long as possible. Otherwise, item 1 is apologies replacement members.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Reid.
It's on now. Item 2, declarations of interest. I note at 4.4 Bardney, Harvey Kent Gardens, Henry Lane, application for no waiting, proposed no waiting, and school clear markings. I am the district councillor, the county council for the area, and I'm newly elected to the parish council there. So I haven't signed in yet, but will do in a few days. But I haven't been consulted with regard to any of these issues, so therefore I can chair this item on the agenda without problem. Would anybody else like to make any declarations at all? Given the chance? No? Okay, thank you. So I'll therefore move on to the minutes. Previous meeting was the 17th of April, previously been circulated, and you've had a chance to read them. I'm quite happy to move them from the chair. Councillor Skinner's proposing them for seconding. I will make sure you're all awake. Everyone in favour, please show. Excellent, look at that. Everybody's voted, so that's unanimously approving them. So we must have a good committee clerk. Thank you for that. I will sign those off in a moment. But moving on rapidly to traffic items. 4.1 West Ashby, A153, Main Street, Horncastle Road, proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Jan's going to introduce this one. Jan Gibson, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So the first paper today is for a speed limit at West Ashby. Next slide, please. West Ashby is situated on the A153 to the north of Horncastle. Next slide, please. We received a request for the existing 40-mile-an-hour limit to be reviewed, see if it could be reduced to 30. Mean speeds on this section came in at 36 miles per hour, which means that it can be considered as a borderline case. It's therefore recommended that the committee approves a 30-mile-an-hour here so that we can begin the consultation process. Thank you.
Councillor Hall, please.
So, thank you. I mean, I use this road on a fairly regular basis, and to be honest, I don't think it does need a 30-mile-an-hour extension. So I would like to propose that this is rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how well other people know this, and sorry, Councillor Hall, I'm going to speak in the opposite direction to you. This is the village at the bottom of the hill just before Cadwell Park, I think is the rough way to describe it. Certainly on race days, I think you probably wouldn't hit a limit in all sorts of areas in that location. I know the area very well. I've got friends in West Ashby. Scamblesby is a little bit nearer, I suppose, isn't it, thinking about it? There we go, that's the phone going, never mind. So I'm going to propose that the meeting as printed is taken forward. Would anybody else like to speak? Would anybody else like to second a proposal of any type? Please, somebody. I can't do it. I need another body to either second me. Thank you.
I'm happy to second yours.
You're seconding, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak in favour of the other direction? Okay, so it's therefore proposed and seconded that the application as printed is accepted. All in favour, please show. 2, 4, 6. Those against, 1. So therefore that's carried. But we respect your comments, Councillor Hall. Okay, so moving on then to 4.2, which is A1175, Deeping St Nicholas, proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Thank you. This is another borderline case for a similar extension to a 30-mile-an-hour limit into an existing 40-mile-an-hour limit. Next slide, please. So we're through Deeping St Nicholas on the A1175. Next slide, please. The existing 30-mile-an-hour limit is to the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. A 40-mile-an-hour exists then between that and the 50-mile-an-hour limit at the top right-hand of the screen. Mean speeds have indicated that the criteria are met for a 30-mile-an-hour limit at the southern end, and that they are met for a 40-mile-an-hour limit at the northern end, and in the middle we have a borderline case at 35 miles per hour. So the proposal is that we retain the 40-mile-an-hour limit for the stretch to the north and extend the 30-mile-an-hour limit northwards just to the north of Harrow Road, as shown at Appendix B. This will be subject to the committee's approval as a borderline case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open the committee and I'm going to rely on the local members to come forward because, believe it or not, I'm not and very knowledgeable of Deeping St Nicholas. So, Councillor Pepper.
Thank you, Chairman. It is in my division. I do know the road very well. For those who don't know, Deeping St Nicholas is one of the longest villages in the country, and goes with it some fairly straight roads with a little kink in it here and there. So any safety measures are welcomed. I have to say the area in question does encompass the local shop. It encompasses the bus stop and also the avenue there, which is also a 30-mile-an-hour limit. I was also subject of a car driving straight at me whilst doing speed watch in this section, and so I really do welcome any speed reduction in this area and fully support this. I've spoken to the parish council, they support it too, so I'm going to propose that we accept the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an area that I go through quite a bit actually, and I'd be quite happy to second that in line with the thoughts of the local member. Thank you.
Thank you. So proposed and seconded. Do I have any further speakers? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question, really. I'm quite happy to support the recommendation. My understanding of our speed limit policy is a mean case is 35 and 1 point is 37 miles an hour. Now, in this case, I understand the rationale. The only thing I would say, Chairman, is this seems to happen on a rather frequent basis where things are grouped together in terms of mean speed, whereas if it was a standalone request, it wouldn't be deemed a borderline case. So can I understand the rationale of that? In this case, I understand why it's here, because it makes sense to, but there have been other cases where that's been done, Chairman, and we've asked for amendments. So it's just to understand how that works in practice. Thank you.
Jan, can you answer that for us, please?
I think we rely entirely on the mean speed to guide us in the policy. Where it doesn't meet the policy in terms of directly for a speed limit, this borderline case is there to give members the opportunity, if they wish, to drop the limit further than it would be ordinarily possible. Does that answer your question? I wasn't sure if...
In part, yes. So if they're grouped together like this, basically because normally it's, as I say, it's to 35 miles an hour. So if they're grouped, you can say have one that's, say, an outlier in the policy where you as the senior officer will make a judgment call. And actually, although it's over, this is still a borderline case and it should still go to committee. But if it's standalone, it'd be a bit more inflexible and it would be, well, actually, it's above that. So it can't really, because it's contrary to policy.
Yeah, I think that's why we've left the one at the northern end, which is 37, because that meets the policy for a 40 and it's too high for a borderline case.
Yeah.
So we've left a stretch of 40 there between the 50 and the 30.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
And I can now get my microphone on. Thank you. Okay, right. So, proposed and seconded. No other speakers to this application. All in favour, please show now. Thank you. That is unanimous. So, I'll therefore take you to Market Deeping next, Stamford Road and Millfield Road, proposed 30 mile an hour limit. Jan, please.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we're in Market Deeping at the roundabout with the A15 and Stamford Road. Next slide, please. Local members requested that we evaluate the speed limit on the section shown in green, which is currently subject to the national speed limit. The mean speeds shown there indicate that on Mill Road that the criteria for 30 are met. And then again we have a borderline case on Stamford Road. So it'll be subject to the approval of this committee that we, if we can reduce that green section to 30 mile an hour limit. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I do get down to this part of the world, but I think I use the roundabout more than the section going into Market Deeping unless I do miss the junction. But yes, I have been down this road. The officer suggestion is that we approve it, approve the necessary consultation. I'm quite happy to propose that. Councillor Pepper?
Thank you, Chairman. I do know the road. It's in my neighbouring division and happy to second it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. That is unanimous again. Thank you. We now move on to 4.4 Bardney, Harvey Kent Gardens, Henry Lane. Proposed no waiting at any time and mandatory school keep clear markings. Jan, please.
Thank you. This is consideration of parking restrictions in the vicinity of the school. Next slide, please. The school is situated to the east of the village on Henry Lane. Next slide, please. Currently, where the double yellows are shown on this plan, a single yellow line exists, but these are not well observed. And the proposal, therefore, is to change these to double yellow lines and add a bit more further into Harvey Kent Gardens to discourage parking here during the school pick-up and drop-off times. We've had objections to these restrictions on the basis that they will displace parking further from the area. I believe some teachers do park on street at this location as they are unable to fit into the car park. Our recommendation, however, is that these objections are overruled on the basis that the junction should be kept clear, the restrictions are in place anyway during the day, and otherwise parking will compromise highway safety. The recommendation is that the objections are overruled. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Where do I start with this? On Thursday morning last week, there was a tanker, a lorry, hit a car on this very junction and took the front bumper off and other parts of it. I'm aware that slightly further along the road another car's had its side taken out over a period of time. So I am very supportive of trying to put this into place. Whilst we're talking in terms of lorries and cars hitting each other, I'm very concerned that this is a primary school and I'm very concerned that, okay, it's been lucky so far that it's just been metal to metal that's actually happened. If we had a small person there, a child, it would be a whole different story. And I really think that we should get this into place as quickly as possible. So therefore I'm proposing it. Councillor Skinner?
Thank you, Chairman. Quite happy to second this. I totally agree with your sentiments here. In real case, there's a big enforcement issue even without the additional lines, because parking in those zones would actually breach the highway code and a number of other road traffic offences. But I think reinforcing it by putting double yellows, I'm wholeheartedly supporting it. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show now. Thank you. That is unanimous. Councillor Pepper, can you turn your mic off, please? Thank you.
Sorry.
So I'll move you on to 4.5 now, which is Lincoln Croft Street, proposed amendments to parking bays. Jan, please.
Thank you. So in Lincoln on Croft Street, we have, it's just parallel to Monks Road there, just to the east of the city centre. Next slide, please. So currently there's a 30-minute limited waiting bay, as shown in pale yellow on the plan. Since a business closed down a number of years ago, it's very little used. It's too far from the city centre to be practical to park, and we have had representations from residents that this could be better used as further permit parking for the prevailing zone 2A in the area. So the proposal is to change this bay and a portion of the adjacent 2-hour limited bay into permit parking only. So we've had a number of objections from remaining businesses in the area on the basis that this will impair their customer base, that they won't be able to load and unload equipment to the premises. But given that parking is available after 6 o'clock on the southern side of the road, further 2-hour bays are available nearby, and the fact that the permit bay will not be operational after 6 o'clock and these premises generally operate in the evenings, the recommendation is that the objections are overruled so that the scheme as advertised can be implemented. Thank you.
Okay, I do know this area again. In fact, I have been known to park not far from here when considering parking, going into the town centre. So I'm very familiar with the area. Having said that, though, I do hear the need to amend the area so that the new scheme can be introduced. I'm quite happy to propose it. Can I have somebody that knows the area, ideally, that can speak to the application? I would like somebody to second either the recommendation as printed or to provide an alternate proposal. Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Very happy to second. It's not an area I know that well, but I do know it, and it's been well laid out in the case. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So I'll therefore put it to the vote. All in favour, please show now. Thank you. That is unanimous. I will say anybody against, any abstentions? No. So therefore that is carried as printed. Finally, we go to 4.6 Louth Mayfield Crescent proposed waiting restrictions. Jan, please.
Thank you. So a request for waiting restrictions has been received at this location. Next slide, please. Down to the southeast of the town centre. Next slide, please. So the junction is Mayfield Crescent with Kenwick Road. Currently, there is a convenience store on this junction, and customers tend to park very close to the junction to nip into the shop. And this has been observed to be causing obstruction to visibility for vehicles emerging from Mayfield Crescent. Our proposals are short sections of double yellow lines as shown at Appendix B. We've had objections from the convenience store on the basis that deliveries will be disrupted. However, there is an exemption, usually a standard exemption on double yellow lines, that loading is permitted, and therefore we recommend that the objections are overruled so that we can install these lines as advertised. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll therefore open it to committee. I do know the road. Good. Councillor Hall.
So yeah, I mean this area is within my division, and I know that obviously the convenience store has concerns, but from a safety perspective, I completely agree with the officer's recommendation. And you know, there is an issue to put along Kennet Road in general, quite frankly, with cars parked, but obviously understanding that a lot of residents use parking on the side of the road, and that's how it is. But just those short sections, I think, is quite a wise move, and I propose that we fully support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to second the application then. I do know this road. It takes you out to the bypass and towards Cawthorpe and beyond. It's the Mablethorpe Road, if you like, out of Louth, for want of a better expression. So, anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing nobody. Proposed and seconded. Proposed by Councillor Hall, seconded by me. All in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous, but I will say anybody against, any abstentions. Okay, so that completes the traffic section. Thank you, Jan, for coming this afternoon. I hear it's raining outside, so I hope your office isn't too far away. And we will move on to item 5, which is County Matters application 5.1, which takes us to the retention of Baston number 2 site and section 106 agreement, amongst other things. So, officer introduction, please, when it's available.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, good afternoon, members. Yeah, so this item, the paper in front of you actually deals with 2 separate planning applications relating to Baston number 2 quarry, which, if I could have the next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of, hopefully some context, the application, there's 2 applications, I say. One's proposing a southern extension to the existing quarry, and one relates to an application to retain the existing plant site associated with the quarry to enable it to be retained to facilitate the working of the proposed extension. The site itself is located to the north of the settlement boundary of Market Deeping, to the east of the A15 and village of Langtoft, which hopefully you can see on the slide there. In terms of the next slide, please, if you can, please, Rachel. So in terms of the application for the southern extension, the application seeks an extension to the existing quarry, which is in its current final phase of working. The extension seeks to extract 1 million tonnes of sand and gravel approximately over a 5-year period, with 2 years with subsequent restoration, as a continuation of existing operations. It'd be worked in 2 principal phases, which have been identified as phases 6 and 7, and you can just see on this slide here the area to the north of the green area is the existing quarry, with the green area being the extension areas. Can I have the next slide, please? Following restoration, the intention is to restore the area of the quarry extension into a lake that would be suitable for fishing uses, and that would also tie in and assimilate with the approved restoration scheme for the wider quarry. The second application is for the retention, as I say, of the plant site. The plant site currently is subject and associated with the existing permitted quarry, and the requirement of a legal agreement requires it to be restored following the working ceasing within that site. Therefore, the applicant seeking to retain the ability to keep that plant site to enable, obviously, the working of the extension, should that be permitted. As well as that, there's also a proposal to extract any underlying mineral that remains within the footprint of the plant site, which is currently not consented. Both applications are subject to an environmental impact assessment, so an environmental statement's been submitted that considers the impacts of both elements of the 2 proposals in a range of matters which are detailed in the report. In terms of the consultations that have been undertaken, you'll see those set out in detail within the report, and I won't propose to go through those, but just to say that there's been no overall objection from the Parish Council, the Environment Agency, the Highways, Historic England, for example. We've had no major representations received from the members of the public. We have had a holding objection from the Wildlife Trust, which I'll come on to in a moment. So in terms of the main issues for the consideration are to do with the need to release new sand and gravel reserves as part of this proposal. This proposal, as I say, incorporates two areas of new extraction, one being the southern extension area and one being the mineral from underneath the plant site. If I can go to the next slide, please, Rachel. Thank you. So in terms of the extension area forms part of a site which is allocated within the Minerals and Waste Local Plan to be identified as an extension to this particular quarry. So for members, the area that's part of this application is effectively the central part of the allocation. So it doesn't cover the entirety of the site, but it's about a third of the site that has been allocated. So there's, the allocation was made on the basis of identifying a shortfall that was likely to happen towards the end of the plan period, and therefore the working of reserves from that particular area. The area within the footprint of the plant site is not an allocated site, and so would need to be considered as an unallocated incidental application for working. And you'll see within the report on page 86 that the assessment of the need argument's been considered. That looks at existing reserve assessments based on the county's current reserve and land bank. And when we look at those reserve figures from the local aggregate assessment, it's an expectation that there's a requirement to provide a minimum of 7 years land bank reserves for sand and gravel. And taking into account current reserves available within permitted sites and recent sales, officers are content that the land bank is possibly just above the 7 years minimum requirement that's advocated within the plan, but obviously that is doesn't take into account recent sales. So there is a need to ensure that we've got a steady supply of aggregates in this area and therefore a time to release these reserves. With regard to the plant site area, these would be, as I say, previously unconsented and unallocated reserves. However, officers are satisfied that this working would effectively be the final phase and retreat of working from the operations, and so to prevent a sterilisation issue of what may be valuable resources, then in principle the working of that area would also be acceptable and wouldn't undermine the purposes and principles of the plan supply policies within, in particular, policies to M2, M3 and M4. In terms of the other main issues I had mentioned, the Wildlife Trust had raised an holding objection with regard to concerns about the impact of discharge of waters in particular from the site and the impact this may have on the Baston Fen Special Area of Conservation. However, Natural England, you'll see, have raised no objection or concerns with regard to the risk that that particular activity may pose, on the basis principally that it's a continuation of what the current quarry is effectively doing. So the quarry does dewater and does discharge already under a licence arrangement with the Environment Agency. There'd be no change to the rates of discharge and therefore no expected change in terms of potential impacts off-site to the Baston Fen SAC. And then finally, with regard to the other main issue really is to do with traffic impacts and movements. The site itself currently is subject, as I say, to a 106. That includes a routing restriction which directs traffic along Cross Road, down and away from the village. And that would be continuing under this proposal, and the applicant therefore has agreed to enter into a 106 to ensure that those same provisions apply to any permissions granted for both the extension area and also to the retained plant site. So if I could just draw attention to the members to the update. There was an update that went out on Friday just to pick up a minor error with regard to condition 20 in Appendix C, which relates to the plant site. There's a recommendation that there's been a slight change to the wording of the condition there to do with lighting. But other than that, it's the officers recommended that the permission be granted subject to first the applicant entering into a 106 planning obligation, and in respect to the therefore if permission is granted for the extension, which is the application S221610, and obviously subject to the committee agreeing to that particular item, that similarly permission be granted for the plant site retention under application S221612. So if I could, Chairman, could I recommend and advise we do those recommendations, the vote on those separately so it's clear. Thank you.
That's fine. So, committee, you've heard the officers' recommendations. There is quite a bit of activity in this part of the world, as you're aware. I hope you've read the reports and you've acknowledged the fact that the amended condition 20 is there as well. Would anybody like to speak to the report? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst I can understand the, shall I say, frustrations and concerns that some residents have in relation to this site, it is essentially, or part of it is on an existing site, albeit that wasn't in the original scoping report for extraction. And in real terms, I think it would be remiss not to grant the application because, as has already been outlined by the officer, we do not have a 7-year land bank in this part of the world, and we are required to make sure all our areas have a 7-year land bank under national planning policy, and there is a site basically already in operation, already there. It is far better to grant this site where it's already active than to think, oh, we're going to have to do another site that's not active 10 miles down the road or wherever it may be, Chairman. So I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation.
I'm just going to check which recommendation, S221610, S221612, or both of them.
I'm happy to propose both, but I'm happy to do it separately if that's how the officer would like it done. So take them in order, Chairman.
I'll take it that you're going to propose both of them, but I'm going to hold one debate across both applications, then run a separate vote afterwards. Councillor Ashton, followed by Councillor Skinner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, many apologies for missing the traffic items on account of a drainage board meeting I was at previously. Although I was very pleased to get in just in time to hear this one. I can't add substantively to anything that Councillor Smith hasn't already said. It is, to my mind, seems far more sense to carry on a controlled and regulated site that is already in operation, already with those 106 agreements in place to give protection for local amenity, and I'm very pleased to see that they're being continued in respect to the application before us. So notwithstanding that, I'm very happy to second both of those applications, Mr. Chairman.
I hear no questions so far, so I'm going to move forward to Councillor Skinner.
Just to say I'm in support. It makes sense to work with this quarry company that we've worked with before, but with conditions in place to save the amenity of the area. Thank you.
I'm also going to move now to Vice Chairman Councillor Vernon. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to absolutely confirm that the hours of operation are the same as they are now, and just seek some clarity on paragraph 10 on page 106, just about the second section there confirms 12 till 5 on Saturdays, and I just wondered why those hours were different, the maintenance work, and why that couldn't be done at the same time. Sorry. Don't worry about the second part of my question. Actually, that has been clarified, but if I could just confirm that those are the same hours that are currently in place.
Yeah, I think the conditions are a carryover from the existing operation.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, no further questions. Legal.
Sorry, Chairman, can you just double check with the proposal and seconder that includes the amendments to condition 22?
So, going back to 20. Thank you, legal. It's 20, not 22. Slap wrist. Right, so I'm going to do the two applications separately. S221610, and that was proposed by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ashton. And we are seeking to look at the section 106 granting permission along the lines of ABC with the amended condition 20. Are we happy with that? All in favour, please show now. That is a unanimous vote. Anybody against? Any abstentions? That's therefore carried. So therefore I'll now move on to S221612, again proposed by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ashton. All in favour of this, please show now. Same recommendations again. And that again is unanimous. Thank you very much. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, that one is therefore, as printed, carried. 5.2 is Leverton, VW Breakers, Class B1 haulage depot to end-of-life dismantling. So if I can have an officer introduction, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this application takes us to Leverton. It's a resubmission of an application that the committee may remember was presented to members last July, where it was recommended for refusal and the committee agreed. The application's been resubmitted. Very little in terms of the information that's been presented is different to the information that's presented previously, but just to give an overview really of a report. As I say, the report was recommended refusal in July last year. 3 principal reasons were cited for that reason for refusal. One was to do principally with the location of the facility in the open countryside and a failure of the applicant to demonstrate that it was compliant with policy W7, which requires such facilities to be well located to market source of the materials and the waste products that they're utilising. The second was to do with amenity issues with insufficient evidence to demonstrate that the noise from this particular operation could be controlled to an acceptable level. That was principally due to a location on immediate proximity of a noise-sensitive property, which was not associated or functionally linked to the business. And thirdly, there was issues with regard to the boundary treatments that had been used to provide screening to the site, which were deemed to be unacceptable permanent features. As I say, the application was resubmitted rather than refused, rather than appealed, and the application has been gone through the same consultation process. In terms of the information that's been presented, I say very little has been presented directly to deal with those 3 reasons for refusal that were mentioned previously. I say additional statements have been provided by the applicant. However, neither of those add any fundamental new evidence or information that satisfactorily addresses the issues that were raised previously. In terms of the report, you can see the report will go through again. A number of objections have been received from both the from the district council. A number of, I think, 6 local residents have objected, as well as we've had concerns raised from the environmental health. Before I go any further, will go through the slides. So, Rachel, if you could just move that slide on for me, please. This slide just gives you an indication of the position of the facility. It sits centrally within an area that previously has permission for a haulage depot use at the front and also incorporates part of the application site. And the site just to the rear there is an existing permission for industrial uses granted by the district. Next slide, please. This proposal is to utilise the central part in the existing buildings, as I say, for an end-of-life dismantling facility, effectively bringing vehicles in, dismantling into various parts, depollution and then storage. It just gives you an idea of site setup. Next slide, please. And these are just a few slides to give you an indication of what the site looks like. So the building on the bottom right there is the main depollution building that's been proposed. These are all existing structures, so we'll be seeking to utilise these with no fundamental changes to their external appearance. Next slide, please, Rachel. And again, some views here, you can see the yard and the area that's been identified. Obviously, you can see it is part retrospective in that the site has been used or is being used for these activities, although depollution proper, if you like, has not yet currently commenced. I think that's the next slide. Yeah, there's a few photographs here just to give you an idea of the use. It's principally internal depollution activities, storage of parts within the internal shed. The bottom photograph there just gives you an idea of the location. That property is the property opposite the main entrance access point to the site. And final slide, please. And again, so the noise sensitive receptor, the property that adjoins the site is the bottom right there. That was formerly associated with the existing haulage use. Is no longer, it's in separate ownership to the ownership of the site, and that therefore is the individual property. So, sorry, taking back to the report, as I say, through consultation, you would see we've had a number of the same kind of objections and concerns raised as before from consultees, including the Boston Borough Council and the Environmental Health Officer, and similarly from the local residents. As I said, this is a new application following the refusal of the previous. Much of the information is unchanged, and so therefore officers basically haven't are satisfied that the information presented adequately addresses those reasons for refusal previously cited. And for those reasons, the decision or recommendation to the committee is effectively unchanged from that previously presented. I would draw the attention of the committee to the update again that came around on Friday. The planning agent for the applicant did wish the committee to note that he apologised for not being here today due to other existing commitments, and has made a request that the application be deferred in order them to either attend a future meeting to present the case, and therefore as to why they believe permission should be granted. Also, copies of the email correspondence that we requested have been circulated, hopefully with the update as well, so members are aware of those discussions that have gone on with regard to requests for further information, and also the reasons as to why officers feel that a deferral and extension of time would not be justified. In short, as we've said, this is a resubmission. There was an expectation that any resubmission should seek to directly address those reasons for refusal. Despite that and a request for further information provided, that wasn't provided, and officers don't therefore feel that there's a justifiable case for a further delay. So the recommendation, as I say, on the report is that planning permission be refused for the same reasons, in a sense, as those that were previously provided in July 2022, which are set out on page 131. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have no speakers to this application, so I'll go directly to committee. And I can see hands going up everywhere, but Councillor Skinner's identified first.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is my division, and I will bear out with Mark's comments about this site. There's been quite a lot of local debate to even whether they're operating this at the moment as well. But looking at what's before us, the planning permission be refused for the following reasons. I wholeheartedly agree with them, and I'm prepared to move it. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to second Councillor Skinner's proposal. We must, of course, look on every planning application on its own individual merits, and I've studied very carefully what we have in the report before us and the additional material, and I acknowledge the additional comments made by the applicant. But we're not really talking about applicants' comments, we're talking about the substantive issues of planning concerned here. And going back to what our officer has told us, I completely agree that the reasons for refusal of the previous application have simply not been addressed. There being no material change to the planning framework around this case, it therefore logically follows that the only solution is to refuse it, and I completely agree with the reasons set out on page 131, so I second. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I'll move on to Councillor Smith then.
I was just going to second it, Chairman, and my comments have already been said, so I won't repeat them.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton, please.
Thank you. I'm perfectly content to go along with our colleagues today on their conclusions of this application. Personally, I am very, very disappointed that this has come back to us without significant improvement. I note the comments of the local environmental health officer that there is no noise assessment to the correct standard, and as a bare minimum, for me to be able to support this application this afternoon, I would have needed to have seen that noise assessment, its conclusions and recommendations based on it, to give the assurance that neighbourhood amenity isn't going to be affected. And I completely take on board that the applicant doesn't think that neighbourhood amenity will be adversely affected, and in all probability they may well be right. But as a responsible planning authority, we need to have absolute evidenced assurance that that is the case. In terms of the location in open countryside, I'm knowing this area, and I would just note that Old Leek Parish Council is listed in the list of consultees. I'm a member of that council. It hasn't responded, and I haven't been involved in any discussions, but I obviously know this area, know this site incredibly well, and it does. I'm not quite sure the characterisation of open countryside necessarily fits with being a former haulage yard. It already has, it's not exactly a greenfield site by any stretch of the imagination. It's one of those sites which, because of its history previously as a garage and then obviously as a haulage site, has had industrial uses in the past, and despite being located some distance away from any significant settlement, I wouldn't personally have any objection to this site being used for this kind of activity, providing the assurances could be given that the committee could be confident that neighbourhood amenity would not be harmed, and that for me today is the real crux of this application. Should it ever be revisited in a form that those assurances might be given, I might very well come to a different conclusion, but for this afternoon's purposes I'm happy to support colleagues in refusal.
Thank you. I don't think there's anything there for the officer to come back on. So therefore, all I can say is I have no further speakers. Proposed by Councillor Skinner, seconded by Councillor Carrington, that we refuse the application as printed. All in favour of that recommendation, please show now. And that is nearly 2, 4, 6, 7. Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's therefore carried for refusal. Okay, well, therefore, thank you very much for taking part in this afternoon's committee. I think we're going to adjourn for a couple of minutes or so until such a time as we start the next presentation to follow. So I'd encourage people not to run off and to enjoy our next statement or two coming forward. Thank you for attending. Safe journey home otherwise.